Section 2 of Mythology by Jane Ellen Harrison. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 2. Poseidon. Hermes, beautiful, magical as he is, remains always a lesser, perhaps the least Olympian. We turn to another and a greater god, second only to Zeus himself, Poseidon. What were the thoughts, the longings, the ideals enshrined by the Greeks in the figure of Poseidon? At first, all seems simple and straightforward. Poseidon is the god of the sea incarnate. In Homer, as Professor Gilbert Murray says, Poseidon moves in a kind of rolling splendor. Now, as regards the other gods, we have too tardily given up these simple elemental interpretations. We no longer say that Athena is the bright sky, or the storm cloud, or that Hermes is the whistling wind. But Poseidon, we are still apt to feel, is in some special way elemental. It is perhaps because, as Mr. Gladstone long ago pointed out, Poseidon is in Homer marked by an absence of the higher elements of deity, whether intellectual or moral. He is a vast force and almost always a vindictive one. The real reason of this will appear later. It is certainly not because Poseidon is the sea. The sea that laps the isles of Greece is friendly rather than destructive. If we would find the true answer, we must ask the right question. Today we no longer ask who was Poseidon. All of us, even the most orthodox, agree that there never was, never could be, a god Poseidon. There were images of the god, but no god. But though no god Poseidon was, there were worshippers of Poseidon, people who imagined the god, who made images of him, and who were themselves influenced by these images. A god is an eidolon, an imagined potency. His worshippers are actualities. It is not the god who creates the worshippers. It is the worshippers who, in their own image, create, project, the image of the god. An honest god's the noblest work of man remains the profoundest of parodies. The question then we ask nowadays is, who and what were the worshippers of Poseidon? What was their environment? What, as the psychologists say, were their reactions to this environment? What their social activities, their means first and foremost of earning their bread? What their hopes, their fears, their desires, their aspirations? And how did these take shape in the figure of the god? In thinking of Poseidon as sea god, we must never forget that the Greek attitude of mind towards the sea was not ours. To us, the sea is the highway of trade, the means of abundant profit and sustenance. To the Greek it was always the unharvested sea, a barren salt waste where he might not plough or sow. It yielded, however, one form of sustenance, fish, and the later Greeks, unlike the Homeric heroes, were largely fish-eaters. Poseidon was not the sea incarnate, but he was the projection of the hopes and desires of a fisher people. This is certain from his trident, which at least by some was understood as the fisherman's three-pronged spear. The chorus in 7 Against Thebes pray, "O thou Poseidon, steeded monarch who rules the sea with fish-spearing trident, grant release from our terrors." And on a black-figured lekithis, Poseidon is figured sitting quietly on a rock, a fish in one hand, his trident in the other, while his friends Heracles and Hermes fish with other implements, line and basket. The chorus in the 7 Against Thebes invoke, "Steeded Poseidon, Poseidon Hippias, god of the horses." It was Poseidon, Homer tells us, who gave to Peleus his immortal horses. But our most important evidence is the express testimony of the Homeric hymn as follows. "Twofold, shaker of the earth, is the meed of honor the gods have allotted thee, to be the tamer of horses and the succor of ships." Here be it observed, the horse aspect even takes precedence over the sea aspect. Further, Pausanias tells us that Pamphus, who composed for the Athenians their most ancient hymns, says that Poseidon is giver of horses and of ships with spread sails. In Athenian later literature, 2 great hymns to Poseidon come instantly to mind, the chorus in Sophocles' Oedipus at Colonus, and the hymn in the Nights of Aristophanes. In the Knights, Poseidon comes before Athena, for Poseidon was, as we shall later see, the god of the old aristocratic order. The Knights invoke first and foremost, "Dread Poseidon, the horseman's king," and only second do they add, "Hail Athena, the warrior queen." In the Oedipus at Colonus close to Athens, it is Athena and her olive tree who came first, but in the antistrophe we have, "Son of Kronos, Lord Poseidon, this our proudest is from thee the strong horses, the young horses, the dominion of the sea. First on Attic roads thy bridle tamed the steed for evermore, and well swings at sea, a wonder in the rower's hand, the oar, bounding after all the 100 Nereid feet that fly before." It may perhaps at this point occur to someone to urge, this is mere poetry, why make a difficulty of it? The galloping, rearing horses are but racing, crested waves. Do we not still speak of the white horses? The objection might have some validity if it were in poetry only that Poseidon was Hippias, horseman. But it must be remembered that he is also so figured in art. On a fragment of 7th century BC Corinthian pottery, he is represented actually riding on a horse. In his left hand are the reins, in his right an attribute wholly irrelevant to the horseman, the trident fishing spear. Moreover, sacrifices of horses were solemnly made to Poseidon. In Illyria, every 9th year, Festus tells us, a yoke of 4 horses was sunk in the waters. And if Illyria seem a far cry, according to Pausanias, the Argives of old threw horses, bitted and bridled, into Dione in honor of Poseidon. Dione was a freshwater spring at a place called Genethlium in Argolis, so here there is no question of white horses and the galloping sea waves. At Onchestus in Boeotia, remote from the sea, we find again Poseidon as lord of horses. In the Homeric hymn to Apollo, we are told how the god in his journeying came to Onchestus, the bright grove of Poseidon. What is the sea god doing with a grove? There the new broken colt takes breath again, weary though he be with dragging the goodly chariot, and to earth, skilled though he be, leaps down the charioteer and fares on foot, while the horses for a while rattle along the empty car with the reins on their necks. And if the car be broken in the grove of trees, their masters tend them there, and tilt the cart and let it lie. Such is the rite from of old, and they pray to the king Poseidon, while the chariot is the god's to keep. Commentators have broken their heads in the attempt to fix the exact nature of the rite. The details are certainly not clear, but this much is beyond question. We have a rite of horse and chariot driving sacred from early days to Poseidon. The title by which the god is addressed, king or anax, marks its antiquity. Onchestus was a great religious center in the time of Homer. Strabo tells us that the Amphictonic Council usually assembled there, but in his days it was bare of trees. Poseidon's bright grove must have faded and fallen. Poseidon then so far is fisherman and horseman. Strange and incompatible enough are the two functions, but a stranger fact still remains to be faced. He is not only fisherman and horseman, he is bull-man. On a black-figured amphora in the museum at Würzburg, we have Poseidon figured in curious guise. He, lord of the unharvested sea, holds in his right hand, with singular irrelevance, a great blossoming bough, and he is seated on a bull. His left hand grasps a fish, and behind him, vaguely unattached, is his trident. The god has so many attributes, he cannot hold them all. He is a bundle of incongruities. What has the bull god to do with the sea and the trident? What relation has the salt sea to the blossoming bough? The mythologist of bygone days was hard put to it for an explanation. He was driven into all sorts of holes and corners to fit in the pieces of the puzzle. Poseidon, he said, had a title, Phisthalmius, he of the growth. Poseidon was the god of fresh water as well as of the sea, and so on. We shall see in a moment that by the new method, which views the god not as a separate entity, but as a projection of his worshippers, no ingenuity is needed. The riddle solves itself. But first the bull aspect of Poseidon must be more clearly established. A single vase painting is not adequate. One of Poseidon's standing epithets was Taurius. In Hesiod's Shield, Heracles says to the young Iolaus, "Young man, greatly in sooth doth the father of gods and men honour thy head, yea, and the bull god, the earth-shaker." The scholiast, after his kind, suggests that the god is called Taurius because the sea roars and bulls roar. His second thoughts are happier. It is the Boeotian way, he says, to call the god Taurius because bulls are sacrificed to Poseidon, especially at Onchestus. Or, he adds, is it that Poseidon had a bull's head? One thing is abundantly clear. The scholiast did not know. The animal on which a god stands or rides, or whose head he wears, is, it is now accepted, the primitive animal form of the god. Poseidon, then, had once for his animal form a horse, and also, it would seem, a bull. The bull was in the fullest sense his vehicle, his carrier. As the god has himself no actuality, as there is no god, his worshippers chose something, some plant or animal or man, to be the vehicle of their desires, to represent the god they have projected. Now a bull is often thus chosen by a people of agriculturalists. He is a splendid symbol and vehicle of that intense and vigorous life they feel without and within them. So is the horse to a people of horse-rearers. Later, when the worshipper is less impressed by the life around him, when he gains the mastery over these strong, splendid animals, and comes to trust only or mainly in his own strong right arm, the godhead of the sacred animal dwindles, and the worshippers become shy of a bull god or a horse god. But in poetry, the godhead of the animal lingers, and especially the terror and the divinity of the bull remains. It lives on in the story of the death of Hippolytus. Theseus, the father of Hippolytus, is son of Poseidon, and Poseidon has granted him the boon that thrice his prayer shall be granted. When Theseus curses the innocent Hippolytus, he says, "And by Poseidon's breath he shall fall swiftly to the house of death." Hippolytus is driving his chariot by the seashore when the curse falls. He has reached the Coronis Gulf. Just there an angry sound, slow swelling like God's thunder underground, broke on us, and we trembled. And the steeds pricked their ears skyward and threw back their heads. And wonder came on all men, and affright, whence rose that awful voice. And swift our sight turned seaward, down the salt and roaring sand. A great crested wave rose and broke, and swept towards the car of Hippolytus. 3 lines of wave together raced, and full in the white crest of them a wild sea-bull flung to the shore, a fell and marvellous thing. The whole land held his voice, and answering roared in each echo. The horses, maddened, race along the sand. In vain Hippolytus tries to check and turn them. For when he veered them round, and aimed their flying feet to grassy ground, in front uprose that thing, and turned again the 4 great coursers, terror-mad. But when their blind rage drove them toward the rocky places, silent and ever nearer to the traces, it followed. A great sea-bull. There is no such thing. That portent born of the sea that edges in awful silence up to the chariot is the god himself, the imagined terror, and the thunder marks his divine epiphany. Poseidon, then, is fisherman god, horse god, bull god. Finally, we must never forget that though he is not the sea incarnate, he is not elemental. He is ruler of the sea, Pontomedon as the Greeks called him, thalassocrat as we should say today. These various and contradictory aspects, so puzzling to the old method of mythology, are clear enough once we adopt the new, once we state the god in terms of his worshippers. Poseidon, fisher god, horse god, god of the blossoming bough, bull god. Finally, we must never forget that imagined eidolon of a people of fishermen, traders, horsemen, agriculturalists, bull-rearers, thalassocrats. Now all these functions we of the Anglo-Saxon race combine ourselves. We are a fisher people. We are agriculturalists, horse-rearers, breeders of fat cattle, thalassocrats. Poseidon, Hippias, Taureus, Pontomedon might have been projected by ourselves. But the question before us is whether there was in antiquity a people fishermen, agriculturalists, horse-rearers, thalassocrats, who actually worshipped the bull. The word thalassocrat, ruler of the sea, instantly reminds us that the Cretan Minos was the first of the thalassocrats. His god was the Minotaur, the Minos bull. The god Poseidon is primarily and in essence none other than the Cretan Minotaur. Observe we say primarily. Ultimately, Poseidon was very much more, and also a good deal less, than the Minotaur. I offer not an equation, but certain steps in an evolution. I would guard my somewhat alarming statement carefully. The Minotaur is not identical with Poseidon. Rather, he is the point de repère, about which the complex figure of Poseidon slowly crystallizes. Beginning as an island holy bull, worshipped by a population of fishermen, agriculturalists, and herdsmen, he developed with his people. As Minotaur, he spread his dominion across the islands and the sea to Greece proper. There, shedding his horns and hooves, he climbed at last to the snow-clad heights of Olympus. Where and when he got his new name of Poseidon, which in all probability means Lord of Moisture, we cannot certainly say. Let us seek the bull god at home in Crete. The Minotaur is of all mythological figures most familiar, though so long misunderstood. The palace of Knossos is full of the holy bull. His horns of consecration are everywhere. The whole palace is his labyrinth. The Minotaur to us has become a cruel master, calling every 7th year for his toll of victims, Athenian youths and maidens. This is because his figure is presented to us distorted by Athenian chauvinism. But on the Cretan ceiling, discovered by Sir Arthur Evans, the Minotaur is no monster to be slain. He is a king god. He is seated on a primitive throne, the folding stool in use among the ancients. Just such a folding stool, made by Daedalus of Crete, was preserved as a monument of the ancient kings in the Erechtheum at Athens. The head of the monster is indistinct, but of his divine bull's tail curling up behind his throne there is no doubt. In front of him stands a worshipper in adoration. So is it always. To your own worshippers you are a god. To the conquerors of those worshippers, who project their own hate, you are a monster, a devil. What precisely was the Minotaur? Fortunately, we know from the evidence of countless vases exactly how he was figured. He was a man with a bull's head and bull's hooves. Now, there is no such thing as a man, an actual living man, with a bull's head and hooves. Is the Minotaur, then, a fancy monster, or what is the reality behind? What is the Minotaur in terms of his worshippers? The answer is clear, certain, illuminating. The Minotaur is one of his own worshippers, a royal worshipper, wearing a ritual mask, a bull's head and horns, and possibly, though not certainly, a bull's hide. In Egypt, Diodorus tells us, it was the custom in the ruling house to put on the head and foreparts of lions, bulls, and snakes as tokens of royal dominion. Sir Arthur Evans kindly tells me that the ritual form of the Minotaur, as bull-headed man, can, he believes, be traced right back to the hieroglyphs of Egypt. The Minotaur is but King Minos masking as a bull. The object is, of course, that the royal functionary, as representative of the whole state, may get for it the force, the mana, of the holy animal. That, like Hannah, his horn may be exalted. As to this ritual actuality of the Minotaur, it is sometimes objected that the Minotaur may be merely a fantastic hybrid form, like the man-headed bulls who are frequently figured on coins as river gods. But mark the difference. A bull with a man's face or bust is a mere fancy, pure mythology with no ritual counterpart. Sophocles so imagined the great river Achelous. He makes the maiden Deianira say, A river was my lover, him I mean, great Achilleus, and in threefold form wooed me, and wooed again. A visible bull sometimes, and sometimes a coiled gleaming snake, and sometimes partly man, a monstrous shape, bull-fronted, and adown his shaggy beard fountains of clear spring water glistening flowed. Such a figure has no ritual counterpart in actual life. Bulls do not go about masquerading as men to win the mana of men. A beast's lack of free motor images, as the psychologists say, restrains him alike from the follies of magic and the splendors of religion. He has too much sense, that is, he is too closely bound by the experimental method. But a man with a bull's mask is not a fancy, it is a ritual reality. It was a ritual reality in the days of King Minos. It is today. A last survival of the custom may be seen among the Berkshire Morris dancers. The masqueraders no longer actually wear the bull's head, but they carry it aloft on a pole. At Ephesus, the young men who poured out the wine at the festival of Poseidon were, Athenaeus tells us, called tauroi, bulls. In the light of the bull masqueraders, the title becomes clear. The ass's ears of Midas rest on a folk tale accounting for a similar ritual imperfectly understood. Midas is a priest dynast, like Minos, but he presides over an ass-worshipping tribe. The folk tale of the man with animal ears or horns is worldwide, and has probably everywhere a ritual origin. The wearing of horns and animal ears was first misunderstood, then, often, moralized. It was turned into a penalty for some act of hubris, of overweening pride and insolence. But the real, original hubris lay in the worshipper's effort to gain the fertility of the animal which was worshipped. The sign of kingship and the kingdom in Crete, the mascot, as we should call it, was, it would seem, the bull, just as the mascot of the kingdom of Athens was the golden lamb. King Minos, Apollodorus tells us, wished to obtain the kingdom, so he prayed that a bull should appear to him. To whom did he pray? Whence came the bull? He prayed to Poseidon, and Poseidon sent him up from the deep a magnificent bull. So Minos got the kingdom. The coming of the bull from the depths of the sea is like the coming of the bull for the destruction of Hippolytus. It is so manifestly non-natural that it must be based on very ancient tradition. The fabulous island of Atlantis, described for us in the Critias of Plato, has been, we think, correctly identified with Crete. Crete, after her great splendor, sunk for generations into almost total obscurity. The island of Atlantis, Plato tells, belonged to Poseidon. When the gods divided up the world, Poseidon received for his lot the island of Atlantis, and he begat children and settled them in a certain part of the island. It is interesting to find that the bull service of Poseidon, described in the Critias, has very close analogies to the bull service of Minoan Crete. It is as follows. Poseidon, says Plato, gave laws to the first men of Athens, and these laws they inscribed on pillars in the god's precinct, and pledged themselves to their maintenance. It must never be forgotten that Minos was, according to Greek tradition, the first lawgiver, and as lawgiver he lived on, uttering dooms to the dead men in Hades. The ritual of the pledge to maintain the laws was on this wise. There were certain bulls allowed to range free in the sanctuary of Poseidon. The kings hunted these bulls without weapons, using staves and nooses. Again be it remembered, the bull hunts and bullfights of the Minoans appear on many a fresco and gem at Knossos. When a bull was caught, it was led up to the column, and its blood was shed over the inscription. The blood of the victim, mixed with wine, was then drunk and curses invoked on those who disobeyed the laws. The remarkable analogy here is not the mere sacrifice of the bull, but the conjunction of bull and pillar in Atlantis and the conjunction of bull and pillar in Crete. On the frescoed shrines of Knossos, the holy pillar rises straight out of the horns of consecration. On the famous Hagia Triada sarcophagus, we have indeed no direct certainty that the blood of the sacrificed bull is actually applied to the pillar, But the close conjunction of the two, sacrificed bull and pillar, makes it highly probable. Anyhow, our main point is clear. Plato could hardly have imagined a ritual so strange and complex. It must be traditional, and its origin is to be sought in the ritual of the bull Poseidon in Crete. The holy bull of Crete was the symbol, the surrogate of a greater power than himself. He had another name than that of Minotaur. He was also called Talus. Talus is most familiar to us as the brazen man who guarded Crete, circling round the island 3 times a day. Minos, when he married Pasiphae, the all-shining one, received from Hephaestus, Apollodorus tells us, the brazen man Talos as a wedding gift. Hesychius tells us that Talos meant the sun, and Apollodorus, when telling how the Argonauts came to Crete, says Talos was a brazen man, but some say he was a bull. Talos only concerns us insofar as he was a bull, the animal vehicle of the sun, and obviously but another name for the Minotaur, son of Asterion, the Spangled One, with his solar labyrinth. Talos appears on the coins of Crete, sometimes in the form of a budding bull, sometimes as a man holding in his hand, like the Minotaur, a stone, the symbol of the sun. The sun connection of the Minos bull and Poseidon is worth noting, for it will be remembered it was Poseidon who took vengeance on Odysseus for his outrage on the kine of the sun god. We have tracked the bull god home to Crete. The Minotaur, the Minos bull, stands to us henceforth for all the splendor of the Minoan civilization. Poseidon Pontomedon is Minos the thalassocrat. He stands for a culture that in Greece was prehistoric. This explains much. In Homer, Poseidon claims equality with Zeus. He is obliged to yield to his brother's supremacy, but he is always a malcontent and often in open rebellion, persistently vindictive. He is connected always with the impious and outrageous giants. The Cyclopes, a godless race, are his children. In the Odyssey, we learn that these Cyclopes took no heed of Zeus. Odysseus appeals for mercy and hospitality in the name of Zeus, god of strangers, and the Cyclops makes answer, "Belike a fool are you, O stranger, or from far away have come, who bid me fear or shun what gods can do. For the Cyclopes heed of Zeus have none, the thunder-bearer, nor of any one of the high gods. Too strong are we by far." And when Odysseus has blinded the one eye of the Cyclops, he says to him, "Then to your father, Lord Poseidon, pray to heal you." It was this antipathy to Zeus and this aloofness from the Olympian assembly that made Mr. Gladstone, long ago in his monumental Juventus Mundi, divine that Poseidon was in some sense a foreigner. Casting about for a maritime people known to the Greeks, he hit, unhappily, on the Phoenicians. The Minoan civilization in his days lay buried deep and forgotten in Crete. Had Mr. Gladstone lived today, I doubt not that he would have been the first to hail the Minotaur as Poseidon's prototype. It may be noted here that on the mainland Poseidon is often, and indeed almost always, a beaten god. He contends with Hera for Argos, with Helios for Corinth, with Zeus for Aegina, with Dionysus for Naxos. He was forced to exchange Delphi for Calauria with Apollo, and Delos for Tainarum with Leto. In all cases he was worsted. Only at Athens, after contending with Athena, the two disputants were reconciled, though obviously Athena remained the real mistress. Poseidon was worshipped by the old aristocracy, but his salt sea well could not rival her olive tree. All these legends show clearly what we know from archaeological and other sources, that the Minoan civilization came to the mainland and prevailed for a time, but was ultimately overlaid and in part ousted by a purely Hellenic culture of Zeus worshippers. With the Minotaur, the bull god, we are on firm Cretan ground. But what about the horse god? Were the thalassocrats and bull breeders of Crete also horse rearers? The Cretans had horses and chariots, that is certain. In the early part of the late Minoan period, which synchronizes with the early part of the 18th dynasty in Egypt, the horse makes its appearance on Minoan monuments. It is represented together with the royal chariot on the clay tablets which form the palace accounts, Just as during the same period, around 1500 BC, it appears on the tombstones and late frescoes of Mycenae. But, and this is a most important point, by a happy chance we know that the horse was imported into Crete. A curious seal impression found at Knossos shows us a one-masted vessel with rowers beneath a sort of awning. On the vessel, not as we now expect in the hold, but superimposed over the whole design, stands a magnificent horse. The superposition must, Sir Arthur Evans observes, be taken as a graphic mode, and we have here a contemporary record of the first importation of horses to Crete. The date of this sealing is roughly 1500 BC. Further, most happily, the sealing informs us whence the horse came. This is of cardinal importance for the history of the development of the cult of the horse Poseidon. The dressing of the horse's mane in a series of tufts corresponds with that of the horses found on the fresco of the Megaron at Mycenae, and there the horses are colored a deep bay, and they have nose bands. This is contrary to the normal European and Asiatic custom, but is in accordance with Libyan practice. The horse on the Cretan sealing is a Libyan thoroughbred. His fountain-springing tail confirms his origin. An imported horse is not an indigenous horse. We never hear of Crete as horse-rearing, like Argos or Thessaly. We have no evidence in Crete of a primitive horse cult. King Minos does not wear a horse's head. Talos, the sun god, when he races round the island, has no chariot and horses. He goes day by day on foot. "Look at the character of our country," says Cleinias the Gnossian to the Athenian in the Laws. "Crete is not like Thessaly, a large plain, and for this reason they have horses there, and we have runners on foot here. The inequality of the ground in our country is more adapted to going about on foot." In the light of the Libyan horse we begin to understand the explicit statement of Herodotus that Poseidon came to the Greeks from the Libyans. "This god," he says, "they learned from the Libyans, for no people except the Libyans originally had the name of Poseidon, and they have always worshipped him." Further, Herodotus tells us that it was from the Libyans that the Greeks first learned to yoke 4 horses to their chariots. Poets projected these Libyan borrowings back into mythical days. In the 4th Pythian ode of Pindar, Medea prophesies to the Minyan Jason of the colonization of Cyrene, and she foretells the strange change that will come over the seafaring colonists. They will plant cities where Zeus Ammon's shrine is builded. Instead of short-finned dolphins they shall take to themselves fleet mares, and reins instead of oars shall they ply and speed the whirlwind-footed car. Apollonius Rhodius, in his Argonautica, tells of an earlier meeting of the Minyans, that is, the men of Minyas, with the horse Poseidon in Libya. He brings his Argonauts, it will be remembered, from Crete to Libya, which is indeed the nearest point of the African continent. The Argonauts are caught and miserably stranded in the shifting shallows of the Syrtes, and Peleus, one of their leaders, was well nigh desperate. But there came to the Minyans a wonder, passing strange, for out the sea there leapt landwards a monster horse. Huge was he, with mane flowing in the wind. Lightly with his hooves did he spurn the salt sea foam, matching the wind. Like the bull of Hippolytus, the monster horse was a portent, was in fact the epiphany of the god himself. Peleus, we are told, was glad in his heart, for he knew that Poseidon himself would lift the ship and let her go. In Libya, and in Libya only, does there seem a simple and natural reason why a seafaring god should become a horse god. Because in Libya we have the steady tradition of a race of horses, which were the wonder of the ancient world. The story of Pegasus, the winged horse, took its rise in Libya, and hence must have been transplanted by Poseidon worshippers to Greece. The Maenads in the Bacchae sing that Pentheus is born of a lioness mother of the race of the Libyan Gorgons. The Kibisis, or leather wallet, in which Perseus carries the severed head of Medusa, is just the primitive bag in which the Libyan carried the stones which were his principal weapons. The Libyans, says Diodorus, go out to face the foe armed with 3 lances and with stones in leather bags. They wear neither sword nor helmet, nor any other weapon, but look to get the better of their foe by swift movement. Hence they are very skilled in running and stone-slaying. On a Corinthian vase, Perseus is figured attacking the monster with stones. Andromeda by his side keeps him supplied from a goodly pile. Always in representations of the slaying of Medusa, Perseus is hurrying along at a pace truly Libyan. On the shield of Achilles, all round the level rim thereof, Perseus on winged feet above, the long seas hide him. The Gorgon's wild and bleeding hair he lifted, and a herald fair, he of the wilds, whom Maia bare, God's Hermes flew beside him. Horse and man alike were swift in Libya. The winged Pegasus is the counterpart of the winged Perseus. Medusa, the mother of Pegasus by Poseidon, is generally credited with human shape. From her severed neck springs up the winged Pegasus, as on a white lekythus in New York City. But on one monument, a Boeotian-stamped amphora in the Louvre, Medusa herself has the body of a horse, though the face of a woman. She is a horse goddess, and as such the fitting bride of the horse Poseidon. The Boeotian horse Medusa recalls the horse-headed Demeter worshipped at Phygalia in Arcadia. Before leaving the horse, one curious and interesting point must be noted. It has been already observed that as contrasted with the bull, the horse had but small place in the ritual of Poseidon. But sometimes a ritual motive lurks concealed where least expected. Such is, I think, the case with the famous Trojan horse. The story of the horse, it has been thought, arose from a real historical incident misunderstood. The device of Epeius, the horse-maker, was really, it is said, the building of a wooden siege tower as high as the walls, with a projecting and revolving neck. Such an engine is figured on Assyrian monuments. But when we read the chorus of the Trojan women, in which Euripides describes the horse, it is impossible to avoid the conclusion, or at least the suggestion, that ritual rather than historic incident lies behind. The horse is a hobby horse, a fertility horse, a thing that survives in village tradition and custom today. It was a daimonic, even a divine thing. It was explained as a votive offering when its real magical meaning was misunderstood. It was connected with a definite date in the calendar, with the setting of the Pleiades, always to the Greeks a season of agricultural importance. And above all, it was brought up to the city in a great festal procession of young and old flute players and dancers, a regular comus. In the chorus of Euripides, the Trojan women sing of it. O towering steed of golden rein, O gold without, dark steel within, ramped in our gates, and all the plain lay silent where the Greeks had been. And again, O swift were all in Troy that day, and girt them to the portal way, marvelling at that mountain thing, smooth carven where the Argives lay, and wrath and Elion's vanquishing, meet gift for her that spareth not heaven's yokeless rider. And a maiden sings, I was among the dancers there to Artemis, and glorying sang, her of the hills, the maid most fair, daughter of Zeus. And lo, there rang a shout out of the dark, and fell death-like from street to street, and made a silence in the citadel. In the prologue to the same play, Poseidon himself tells how the Greek Epeius came of Phocian seed, and wrought by Pallas' mysteries a steed, marvellous big with arms, and through my wall it passed, a death-fraught image magical. In horse-rearing Argos, some hobby horse must have formed part of a fertility ritual. The essence of the modern, and apparently of the ancient hobby horse, was that it concealed actual live men. This ritual contrivance may actually have been used for some military ambush, but it is more likely that when its real ritual meaning was obscured, it was misinterpreted. It is worth noting that the Trojan horse has an odd Cretan counterpart, which seems to have passed unobserved. Apollodorus tells us that Daedalus, to please Ariadne, made a wooden cow on wheels, hollowed it out inside, flayed a cow, sewed the hide about his handiwork, and put Pasiphae inside. A wooden cow, a wooden horse, both hollowed to hold human beings. Both were part of some ritual gear of a magical sacred marriage, or a ritual of resurrection. The tale of the Trojan horse has all the air of a ritual fossil embedded. There could be no finer instance of the magic of Greek inauguration than the use Euripides has made of it in the chorus of the Trojan women. The uncouth, even ugly contrivance is transmuted to a thing of wonder and beauty. We have seen the bull god in Crete as thalassocratic. We have seen him become in Libya a horse god. We have now to watch him pass to the mainland, to Greece proper. The cult of Poseidon occurs naturally in the bays and on the promontories of the coastline of Greece. We say naturally, but if I am right, the naturalness is not at all what it would seem at first sight. The cult of Poseidon occurs in bays and on promontories, not because it is a sea cult, but because those bays and those promontories were the first landing places of the Minos bull from Crete. The bull of Minos waxed fat and kicked. King Minos desired not only what was his natural right, the hegemony of the Aegean islands. His lust for empire was his undoing. But at first all went well. During the 3rd and 2nd millenniums BC, the Cretans colonized Greece. The sites of Poseidon worship are the landing places of immigrant Minoans. Into the archaeological evidence of this we cannot here enter. It is enough to state the simple fact that at each and every site of Poseidon worship on the mainland, Mycenaean, that is late Minoan, antiquities have come to light. Let us take an instance. In the Odyssey, Telemachus reaches Pylos on the coast of the western Peloponnese. What does he find at the established castle of Neleus, where dwells old Nestor, tamer of horses? Down on the seashore, the people made to the blue-haired shaker of the earth oblation, slaying coal-black bulls to him. 9 messes were there, and in each of these 500 men set after their degrees offered 9 bulls, and then on the inward meat they fed, and burned to God the thigh pieces. And to Poseidon the protector now made supplication, saying, Hearken thou, Poseidon, girdler of the earth, nor grudge our work to end, according to our vow. The site of the modern Kakavatos, shown by Professor Dörpfeld to be the Homeric Pylos, has yielded the beehive tombs which their contents show to be as early as late Minoan too. Going eastward from Pylos, we come to Tainarum. This great promontory was probably one of the first points at which the immigrant Minoans would touch. Nor is this contact mere conjecture. Plutarch tells us of a certain man who had slain Archilochus, and was bidden by the Pythian priestess to go to appease the ghost, to the habitation of Tetix. The habitation of Tetix, Plutarch explains, was Tainarum, for there, they said, Tetix the Cretan came with a fleet. The name Tetix, Cicada, smacks of things ancient. Pindar too remembers Tainarum, and connects it with Euphemus, son of Poseidon. The Poseidon cult at Tainarum, it is important to note, was mainly in the hands of a subject race, the Helots. Poseidon was worshipped there as Asphalius, which means not the steadfast earth, but the safe asylum. Poseidon to the oppressed Helots was a veritable rock of ages. In the rocks of Tainarum were found 70 bronze statuettes representing bulls and horses. Here too were found inscriptions dedicating slaves to the service of Poseidon. By each one of the great sea gates, the gulfs of Messene, of Laconia, of Argolis, and by the Saronic Gulf and the channel of the Euripus, Minoan settlers entered Greece, but nowhere did they leave more manifest mark than in Argolis. The plain of Argos was, and is still, rich and horse-breeding, though the harbourage is bad. It may be for that reason that the Minoan fortresses are all planted inland. Palamedes brought the Cretan script to the sea-town of Nauplia, but Tiryns with its citadel is 2 miles inland. We have seen that at Dione horses were offered to Poseidon. It is natural to ask, have we also traces of the bull god? Fortunately, yes. The frescoes of Tiryns with their bullfights take us straight back to Crete. They might have adorned the palace of King Minos. Moreover, an odd story in Athenaeus lets out that the regular offering to Poseidon at Tiryns was a bull. We do not think of the Tirynthians as especially humorous folk, but Theophrastus, in his treatise on comedy, said they loved laughter and were quite unfit for serious business. They wished to cure themselves of this defect, and consulted the oracle at Delphi. The god made answer that when they were sacrificing a bull to Poseidon, if they would throw it into the sea without laughing, they would be cured. Very prudently, they forbade the boys of Tiryns to come to the sacrifice, but a boy got among the crowd, and when they tried to hoot him out, he said, "You're frightened lest I should upset your bull." And they laughed and realized that the god had meant to show them it was impossible to uproot an old habit. The bull sacrifices of Poseidon in Homer are things of tremendous solemnity, but here we get a glimpse of the lighter side of the matter. Oddly enough, Athenaeus follows the story up by telling us, on the authority of Sosistratus in the first book of his History of Crete, that the people of Phaistus in Crete had the like reputation for lightheartedness. The Phaistians, he said, from earliest childhood practiced the art of saying ridiculous things, and the Cretans unanimously attributed to them preeminence in the art of raising a laugh. It is possible, nay probable, that these laughter-loving Phaistians crossed over from Crete to Tiryns. At Mycenae we have no record of Poseidon cult. It was perhaps the most completely Achaeanized of all the Minoan settlements. But the walls of Mycenae, it was fabled, were built by the Cyclopes, children of Poseidon. Poseidon, we know, had once ruled over the whole land. He had shown the water springs of Lerna to his bride, Amymone, and when the sovereignty of the land was adjudged to Hera, Poseidon in his wrath dried up the springs and made Argos very thirsty. The rival cult of Hera Boopis, the ox-faced, was rich in bulls. Argos himself, Apollodorus tells us, wore a bull's hide and has strange analogies with the Minotaur. When the two bulls met, it may well be that the bull aspect of Poseidon was obscured, and that he wisely, in horse-rearing Argos, specialized in horses. Passing the great sanctuary of Poseidon on the island of Calauria, we come on the opposite mainland to Troezen, associated always with the legend of Theseus. Troezen, Strabo says, was sacred to Poseidon and was once called Poseidonia. Plutarch tells us that the Troezenians honored Poseidon very conspicuously, gave him the title of Polyeucus, holder of the city, offered to him their first fruits, and had his trident impressed on their coins. At Troezen clearly Poseidon is much more than a sea god. Excavations on the site yielded a prehistoric pit grave containing 4 large vases of Mycenaean, that is, late Minoan style. Troezen had, like Athens, its legend of a contest between Poseidon and Athena for the land. Which legend is the prototype of the other is hard to say. In any case, the moral is the same as in the case of Hera at Argos. We have an indigenous goddess of the land, a local Kore or maiden, and an immigrant god who strives with but partial success for the upper hand. Troezen is not without its legend of Cretan immigration. The Troezenians, Pausanias says, honored Damia and Auxasia, and they said that these goddesses were maidens who came from Crete. But the legend most important for our argument looks the reverse way and tells of the conquering expedition of a Troezenian hero against Crete, and that hero is none other than Theseus. Theseus, hero of Troezen, is for our purpose a figure of the first importance. He is son of the local princess Aethra, but his father is none other than Poseidon himself. Poseidon, the story said, met and loved the princess in the little island of Sphyra, close to Calauria. Theseus stands for the blend of indigenous Hellene and immigrant Minoan. He also stands for the Amphictyony of Calauria, potent in those early days, and which linked up the coast cities from the promontory of Troezen to Athens. He goes to Athens and stands also for the time when Athens held the hegemony of the Coast Confederation. His first work on coming to manhood is to cleanse the coast road of robbers, many of them sons of Poseidon like himself. By cleansing the road, he makes the League of Coast Towns a possibility. All the mythology of Procrustes, Scyron, Sinis, and the like, translated into prehistory, figure forth the League's great civilizing work. Calauria stands for the dawning thalassocracy of the mainland, soon to meet Crete in mortal conflict. The crisis is at hand. No sooner has Theseus reached Athens and been acknowledged heir of Aegeus than he is straightway sent off to Crete with the fatal tribute to the Minotaur. The bull of Crete, that is Minos himself, has wasted Attica and subdued Megara, and has been hardly bought off. The tribute ship is matter of history. It was preserved by the Athenians down to the time of Demetrius Phalereus, and was then so pieced and mended, Plutarch tells us in his Life of Theseus, that it afforded the philosophers an illustration in their disputations as to the identity of things changed by growth. In the days of Socrates the ships sailed for Delos, but all men knew that in olden times the same ship had sailed to Crete with the tribute for the Minotaur. Owing to the Dorian conquest, the religious center had shifted from Crete to Delos. Poseidon had emigrated. In the current legend, the two centers are awkwardly linked together. Theseus is made to call at Delos on his way home in order to dance the crane dance. It is rarely that we see prehistory so clearly reflected in mythology. And finally, in the labyrinth, Theseus slays the Minotaur. He, the son of Poseidon, he who, according to another legend, married the Cretan Phaedra and sent the bull of his father Poseidon to slay his son Hippolytus. He, Theseus, sails to Crete and slays the royal bull and drags him from his great palace. It all sounds at first paradoxical, but viewing the god and the hero in terms of the worshipper, the riddle is not hard to read. Theseus, we must always remember, is not Poseidon himself, only the son of, that is, the descendant of Poseidon. He stands, I think, for the worshippers of Poseidon, partially Hellenized, Achaeanized on the mainland. The bull of Knossos had indeed waxed fat and kicked, imposing intolerable tribute on Athens, on Megara, and probably on all the coast towns of the Amphictyony. The tributaries turned at last, and somewhere around 1400 BC, Knossos fell by the hands of her own children, the colonists of the mainland. The fall of Knossos caused no breach in Minoan civilization. There was no intrusion of an alien race. Knossos falls, the Minotaur is slain by the young Athenian hero Theseus, and henceforth for Athens and for all the civilized world that lay under the ban of Athens, the royal bull is a savage monster. Vae victis. But Plato, or whoever is the writer of the Minos, knew quite well that this was only because events were seen through hostile Athenian eyes. Crete was the mother and source not of barbarism, though her wealth is not wholly free from some tinge of barbaric excess, but of civilization. Minos to his enemies might be the baleful one, but he was a mighty lawgiver and made piracy to cease. When in the dialogue, the companion of Socrates admits that Rhadamanthus was reputed a just judge, but would maintain that Minos was fierce and hard, Socrates turns on him and says, "But my good man, you know that is but an Attic fable you are telling, a stage plot." And he himself tells a different tale. Even on Attic vase paintings there are traces of the sanctity of the Cretan bull. He wears fillets like the Minotaur. Commentators explain that he wears them proleptically, by anticipation, because he is about to be sacrificed by Heracles or Theseus. He wears them because he always wore them, because he is the holy and royal bull of Crete. We have traced Poseidon from Pylos to Athens. It would be easy and pleasant to follow his track further along the coast round Attica by Boeotia, through the Euripus by Euboea, on to Iolcus and finally to Tempe. But space does not allow, nor is it needful for our argument. Everywhere we should only find the same tale repeated: the worship of the bull god and the horse god, the presence of the Minoans, the people of Minos, and everywhere, when excavation has been made, Minoan remains. Once Tempe reached, the Minoan colonists seem to have paused. We find no more Minoan remains. The horse god and the bull god disappear. Poseidon has been dealt with at some length and at the outset, not because he is the most interesting of the Olympians, nor yet because he is the most characteristically Greek. Far from it. He has been the subject of no great masterpiece of art, whether in poetry or sculpture. He has been chosen for two reasons. First, because he stands for that great pre-Hellenic Minoan civilization, without a knowledge of which it is impossible nowadays to attempt any study of Greek art. The Minoans were great civilizers, great artificers, great craftsmen, and a people profoundly religious. They were not a people of artists. With all their skill and all their splendid material and costly apparatus, they lack that instinct for beauty, that austere reserve, that divine spark which was all Hellenic. We must not ask of Poseidon what is not his to give. Secondly, Poseidon has been chosen because perhaps better than any other god he illustrates the principle by which the new psychology works, the principle, namely, that regards mythology and theology as springing not clean and clear from man's imagination, but rather from the worshipper's reaction to his environment. There are, we repeat, no ancient gods. There are ancient reactions, emotions, activities, embodied in representations. It is for us to discover those reactions. In a word, mythology is prehistory, and when it is confirmed by archaeology, as in the case of Poseidon, we may venture to trust it. End of section 2.